Hi there, today's book is The Ice Limit by Douglas Preston and Lincoln Child. In this book, we meet Palmer Lloyd. He is a billionaire, a very successful businessman, and he, I guess as rich folks do, collect rare artifacts, rare things that nobody else can afford. And so he had gotten a lead on this meteorite, which is in near Chile, and he felt like he had to have it because he wanted to open up a museum, and he has a huge collection already, and he felt like this would be a huge addition to it. So he reached out to EES, which is Effective Engineering Solutions, which is a company that does these type of expeditions, and they also are very good at it because they do detailed mathematical and scientific evaluations before the mission to determine like any kind of anything that could potentially come up, and that way they can solve for that. And then they also determine, I guess, a cost analysis as far as how much the mission is going to run, what the equipment would be needed, the manpower, casualty, all kinds of things they do. So just for that assessment alone was around $1 million. So he decided to do that, and then once he received that, then there was a fee as well for them to actually complete the mission. So it was a huge, huge expenditure. But, of course, he can afford it. He decided he had to have the meteorite. So he went and found Sam McFarlane, who is a planetary geologist, a meteorite hunter. He was at some remote location. So he flew in and talked to him and about, getting this expedition done. And then he also promised him, to pay. And then if they complete the mission, some kind of position at his museum that he was planning to open. So anyway, he finally convinced Sam to join the expedition. Sam recruited Sally Britton. She's the captain. She had some professional issues, and so her work had dried up. However, she's really, really good captain. And so she would join the mission, and she would be the one to captain the tanker. So they're using a tanker because they are going in to get the meteorite under the guise of a mineral excavation, I guess. So because the meteorite is in Chile and it's not something, it belongs basically to the country, and they don't want to go through all of that because it could open up, tons of problems. They decide to go under the guise of a mineral operation, and then they would, secure the meteorite, and then they'll take off. So there's also a mathematician who is with EES. Her name is Amira, and she's a brilliant mathematician. Anything that you could potentially need, she can come up with an equation for it, for calculations to be done. There's also Garza, who's the construction manager for EES, and then there's also, different crew members that were hired as well. And so they head down south to get to the spot for the meteorite. So when they first were able to uncover a portion of it, they realized that the meteorite is very unusual because of the color. Now, they were supposed to be giving daily reports to Palmer Lloyd. However, he just came in, swooped in when he wasn't supposed to. And so they had to bring him to the site because he wanted to be one of the first to be there. And so he just shuts everybody out, and they had to take him there. And when he gets there, the guy just jumps into the site and put his face on the meteorite and had to touch it, even though, he was told not to touch it. He went ahead and did it anyway. All right, so they kind of tried to shoo him away, and he went back to New York. So they decided, they have to work on getting it completely excavated, and then they have to put in the infrastructure then to stabilize it, and then to move it into the tanker. So while they're doing that, it's one of the jacks failed, and they lost two of the crew members. So everybody is now scared, like, is it really something that we should do? Because they found out that the meteorite was, one, much bigger than, they had projected, and secondly, it is super, 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 super dense. And so because of that, it's very heavy, and so, they didn't expect that. So they had to work on redoing, the setup that they had. Now, there is a a guy in the Chilean Navy that they came across, and he was suspicious of them, and he started to watch them and try to find out information as far as why they were there. So he determined that they really weren't doing any mining, but what were they up to? And so later on, he kind of figured out what they were up to. And so he had sent somebody on his team to go over to where they were. And he wanted to get this indigenous guy, Pop, to get more information. And so they sent in Timur. And he went in and snuck into the site, and because there was a one guy who was walking around, he killed the guy. And so he snuck in to try to see what's going on so he could bring back intel. And when he went, he found the meteorite, and he touched it. And of course, there's a massive explosion, and he got killed. So he never was able to go back. And so, of course, Vianara knew where he sent him, and he came looking for him. So they tried to stall and say, hey, he intruded, and, we have him in the brig, and, trying to stall for time and to be able to get away before he finds out. Now, once he discovers that that their tanker was moving, he knew that Timur was dead. And if it turned out that Timur had a close association, a relationship with Vianara, so he determined that he wants to get revenge, and he's going to bring the tanker down. So loaded up the meteorite, and they're moving out. Now, in between the time that Timur got killed, they discovered that the meteorite was reacting to salt water, which they couldn't figure out why. So they're on the open seas with this thing, and they have to make sure that, one, it stays stable, or it would capsize the tanker, and two, they have to keep the salt water away from it. So Vianara attacks the tanker, and the tanker sustains some damage. However, in the process of him pursuing them and firing at them and them trying to escape, his destroyer got into some serious situation where he wasn't able to pursue them any further. I don't want to give away what exactly happened with him and his tanker. So anyway, in the midst of that, of the pursuit and him firing on them, the tanker got damaged, and so the crew had to, although they didn't want to leave, Parmeloid he didn't want them to, to sink the meteorite, because they had a failsafe that would allow them to get rid of it if the tanker was going to sink. So when Eli decided, okay, we're going to have to get rid of this meteorite, Parmeloid, who wasn't supposed to be there to begin with, he was, he was saying absolutely not. And so as they analyzed what was happening further, he changed his mind because he didn't want to die. And now Eli Glenn is saying, no, we feel like we have sufficient assurances that we're going to be safe. As it turns out, he was wrong in that. And the crew had to evacuate the ship and get on their lifeboats. And it was super bad weather because there's a storm that was going on. It's called Pantanero, which is a storm that has super high gale force winds, not to mention that they're in the Antarctic area, which is super, super cold. So when the crew that did manage to escape got in the lifeboats, they were pretty much freezing to death. And however, Eli was still on the ship, and he was trying to, stabilize and fix things to be able to bring the meteorite home. So it turns out that he was believed to have gone down with the ship. And so there were a few people who escaped, and we find out after the fact that a few notable people in the expedition had died. And Parmeloid, he decided, you know what? I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do any museum. I don't want to do any business. I'm just going to go to my farm up north, upstate, and just relax. I don't want to do anything. So he was kind of despondent about the loss of the meteorite, because that was he just had to have it, and now the failure of that, he just couldn't take it. So anyway, we find out at the end of the book that Amira, who was working as Sam's assistant, had some information on the meteorite, and it wasn't really what they believed it was. As a matter of fact, it wasn't really a meteorite. And based on what Sam was saying, that it was detrimental to Earth, and this is something that needed salt water. And what do you know? The tanker went down with it in salt water. So it's doomsday scenario for Earth because of where it was and what the potential impacts could be. So this is how the book ended. So this is a departure from the typical thrillers, but very exciting, not just because of what is happening, the storyline, but also because it's scientific, and most of the thrillers tend to be the typical murder mystery type of thing. And this one was quite interesting. I learned quite a few things about weather systems, about geology, about science. So this is a really cool one. When I look this book up, I see that there's a sequel to this as far as what's happening afterwards, because towards the end of the book, there were some news articles about what had happened with the expedition and how Palmer Lloyd was going to go back and try to recover the meteorite, and there's some expedition to be able to destroy it to keep it from, creating huge impacts and damaging Earth, because that's what was believed. And so this next one, this follow-up book should be super interesting. I feel like at some point I will check it out. So definitely exciting one. 4.5 stars. I did enjoy this a lot. If you have read or listened to this book, let me know your thoughts.